So let's get the tip now. Be careful, you don't want to poke yourself. It's not going to feel good. This is a bad place to get coarse lines. It's not a very fun area to sand, I don't think. Another thing you can do is you can get a piece like this, take a different approach. This works probably only on the tip. I would say it's not too great on other areas. It wears out the paper faster, but because the tip has less surface area, it speeds it up a little bit. I don't like to do it too much. I like to keep my grit lines all one way. Now that's probably the biggest disadvantage of using these 4x36 grinders is you can't get very nice finer grit belts. Otherwise I would definitely bring my belt finish up a bit higher to make this part easier, but for some reason I can't put my finger on it. The finer grit belts, you can get them, I just don't think they're very good. They wear out really fast and are not terribly effective. So I find it just easier to just do it by hand. So I've just about got all my grit lines from the very tip, from here down, which is all I'm really looking for. Sometimes it's nice to come up over here a little bit, but it's not completely necessary. Now we're going to get in between. Now this area takes quite a bit longer, but that's just because there's just more surface area, which takes a little longer to sand. Just be patient, it'll go. Looks like I got a couple of coarse lines here. That's okay. This is when the slightly variations in the planes you created with the sander, you'll be able to see those with the belt finish. This is when you kind of even them out into a very slightly convex surface that appears more or less flat. You'd be amazed how much material you can take off with this. I mean, it's nothing like the belts, but you can still round stuff off pretty well. And this is also, if you've got good lighting, when you'll probably start to see your quench line show up. It's sort of exciting. I've just about got the soft side done. There's a couple of marks here that I'm going to keep focusing on, but I think it's mostly on the harder part now, which you'll find sands away still pretty easily, well, relatively, if you just frequently use fresh paper. Dull paper doesn't work so well on the hard part, obviously. Now you'll see the lines disappear from the sides and the edge first. Once you get them off the edge, try and stay off of that so you're not thinning it out too much. And thinning it out, even if you thin it to a point, isn't a big deal. You just want it to be consistent. Now, what a lot of makers do is to make sure they get all of their previous grits out, is they'll now sand perpendicular to the previous marks. But as you can imagine, with this sort of shape of the object we're sanding this way is a whole heck of a lot easier than sanding this way. You're going to risk rounding over your edge and your spine and getting frustrated and cursing, and nobody wants that. So this trick that I have devised is still with our 220 grit, is we're going to get all of these horizontal ones out and put in vertical ones. And we're going to take them out completely. Doesn't take too long. These lines are finer than our previous ones, our 120. So it shouldn't take too long, and I'll do it all the way from the edge all the way to the top of the spine. Now I'll do this not right at the plunge, but close to the plunge, and one close to the tip, and sometimes one in between. Now the reason you use the same grit paper is what is already on there. You can do the next grit up, but it's just going to take a lot longer, and that's going to risk rounding more stuff over, and I just want to get the same grit line oriented in a different direction. We're not going to do it on the whole blade. if we did it on the whole blade, we might as well go up to the next one. But we're not going to do it on the whole blade. So now, when I take my 320 grit, as I'm standing here, when I've got all of these lines out, I know that I've gotten all the 220 from here out because it's the same grit, and same for the tip, and same in between. Now you might have noticed that I didn't do anything on the Ricasso on the last one. That's because I found that it's a lot easier to get out than these ones for some reason. And so I can do it straight from 120 to 320. And that's less sanding, so that's less material I'm taking off. And that's important because we want this to stay flat, and the less we take off here, the less this flat is changed, and the happier we'll be. Now, I'll spray the tang again with oil, just to keep that from rusting. You don't want to spray the whole blade because it's just going to get built up. And you want to keep your push stick. I'm using this large flat here instead of the rounded edge because I want to keep this flat. I'll change the angle a little so I can get this here. And I'll use this big flat area here as a guide to keep that from being rolled over and falling off. Now you don't have to go too far back, you only have to go back as far as you're going to put the front of your handles. Now we can just proceed, sand out the next grit. Being careful to get each stroke up into this plunge to make sure that that gets sanded. Again, it just takes patience. The first few strokes of any new grit always feels like it's doing nothing. But usually after 10 or 20, you can start to see some progress and see that it's not hopeless. So I've ran out of my Norton's 320, and so I've just got this other brand, and it's just a big reminder of why I like the Norton's brand, because it just doesn't work as well. You can get a lot of these grits the same place you get the ceramic belts at the abrasive supply houses online, but they'll give you the cheapest price, and sometimes that means that you get the cheapest sandpaper. So buy the belts from them. You can buy the higher grit sheets, which we'll use when we do sand the handles. But for hand sanding, just get the expensive stuff. You'll save yourself a lot of frustration. I've got one little mark there that I'm focusing on. Still pushing all the way into the plunge. think I've got them all, which means that I'm going to go over it a couple more times just to be sure. Now the same, finish with the plunge, go to the tip,